We talked about it before. It's the second biggest game of the year for Michigan outside of the Ohio State game. Just the way that the season's kind of made itself out here with the Michigan State situation, but it's obviously a must-win for Michigan. But if I had to look on the betting perspective, which is kind of where I come from on the side of that, it's going to be a lower scoring game. It's not going to be a Michigan game where you're going to see 40 points. You're going to probably see Michigan score 27 points. And I do think that they can win this game, and they come out of this game winning 27-17, 27-13. I'm really interested to see what the ground game looks like versus a defense like Penn State, though. That is one of my biggest things today is I want to see what is Blake Corum going to do versus a Penn State defense that's held teams under 80 yards per game rushing. And then on the other side of things with JJ, I want to see him make more plays today. This is going to be the second hardest game of the regular season for him. This is going to be the game that prepares him to play a defense like Ohio State.
Right.
Like he needs to get, this is like a get-right game for him to take that next step. And he's going up against a veteran team with Penn State, like a veteran quarterback that's been in these games on the road before with Sean Clifford. We saw he was on the road versus Purdue, on the road at Auburn, which Auburn's not good, but it's a SEC road game. So that's kind of where I stand. I want to see some of these guys make that next step today to make me more confident in this Ohio State game.
My opinion on this game, too, and I'll go to you, Sam, next, but I think whoever wins this game is going to dominate the line of scrimmage. I think both these teams are built very similar, like to run the football. Penn State now adding 2 freshman running backs, Singleton and Allen. They've been productive this year, and we know what Michigan could do with their offensive line. Obviously, the transfer, one of the best centers, if not the best center in the country right now. But, Sam, what do you feel in this game? Michigan right now, -7 to win. They're in Ann Arbor. We got a couple guys from Woodward Sports there, Braylon, Stick as well. You're a Michigan fan, but you're also a realist. You'll tell it to me straight. So what's your thoughts on this matchup?
So if Michigan plays the game that we think they will and is the team that we all think they are as Michigan fans, they will win this game. I fully have confidence that they will win this game. But the problem is that we still haven't seen Michigan really put together a full, complete game against good competition. And that's one of the things that has worried me. In the last 3 games, it's against the easier part of their Big Ten schedule. The Michigan games have been in peril in the second half. They've had a problem putting teams away. And if Michigan has that, comes out flat at certain times against Penn State will get a lead on them and possibly bury them. And I don't want to see that happen. I want to see if there's a couple people for Michigan I'd like to see step up. A guy like Donovan Edwards. We've talked about it. Blake Corum has stepped up and been sort of that every down, bell cow kind of running back, but I would prefer if they had more of a duo. I don't know if Blake Corum is built to sustain this for the rest of the year. And of course, J.J. McCarthy. The one thing that encouraged me about J.J. McCarthy is his second half against Indiana. Michigan had just played their worst half of football of the season. It was 10-10 at halftime at Indiana. I was mad. I was fired up. I was depressed. But then in the second half, it did look like, despite what a lot of people will say, to me, that Michigan did open up the offense a little bit. That Michigan started out after a stop with an 11-play, 98-yard drive in which J.J. McCarthy made a ton of really good throws. He ran for a first down, and it culminated with that long touchdown pass to Cornelius Johnson, a guy who needs to get more involved in the offense. And then as the second half goes along, Michigan has 2 more touchdown drives and 2 more touchdown passes by JJ to sort of put the game out of reach. And that game also, it showed JJ McCarthy could handle some adversity because they were up 17-10. They were coming off of a big return by A.J. Henning and then a 15-yard penalty and got the ball in great field position. And then JJ McCarthy threw a terrible red zone interception. But he didn't hang his head. He responded. So I'm looking for guys like J.J. McCarthy and Donovan Edwards to really step up. And just one more thing on the defensive side, I want to see if the Michigan defensive line can really get after Sean Clifford. Sean Clifford, to me, is the least of my worries. I don't respect him too much as a quarterback, but he does have experience, and I think he can be rattled if this defensive line with guys like Mike Morris and Iyabiyoki can just hound him. And that's how I think they will win. That's their pathway to me to a comfortable cover the spread kind of victory.
And you hit on 2 things that I do want to go back and talk about, but before, I know the stream started mid, or at least our intro. They didn't get to hear who everybody is, why Adam's out. So I'll re-explain for you guys. Adam is not here. Last night wasn't feeling too good. I know my theory on it. He's watching the Rings game. He's watching Soderblom. He's getting a little too lit, all right? He was drinking a little too much. But he's not feeling good this morning, so we're holding it down for him. That is Booner, under Woodward Sports, works with Woodward Bets as well. I mean, the guy's killing it. So Booner, big Michigan fan, by the way.
Appreciate
Mike,
it.
Sam, you guys know the drill. Had to address that because he didn't really get that in the stream. Adam will be back next week. Feel better, buddy. Love you. But I do want to go back to two things you said because I couldn't agree with you anymore. And those are 2 points that I brought up this week. One of them being Blake Corum. And the big thing for me, as much as because I talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like, if there's a Heisman candidate to come from Michigan, in my opinion, it's Blake Corum.
Yes.
Yeah.
So far,
Agreed.
yes. It's how it's trended. But how can you sustain this with Blake? And that's something that, he could prove all of us wrong. He added 15 pounds of muscle this offseason, so obviously he's gained weight to try and do that. But Donovan Edwards, that's the guy that was talked about before the season as the 1-2 punch with him and Blake. Coming back from injury, you just haven't seen the Donovan Edwards we've expected, or we at least were hoping to see. But with Blake Corum today, I think Blake Corum, this is another one of those moments for him. Like, if he can go out against this Penn State defense and play really well, not only will it help him, but Michigan's going to need it. Because if not, JJ's going to have a lot on his shoulders.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. With the Blake Corum situation, like, this is a prove-it game for him as well. He's had the year he has already. This is like one of those, like you said, a Heisman moment game. You're going up against a defense, like I said a little bit ago, that's only given up 80 rushing yards a game.
Right.
If he goes out there and he gets over 100 and they win by 2 or 3 touchdowns, JJ has the game he needs to have to prepare for this Ohio State game coming down the line. Blake Corum should be in that Heisman race and Heisman candidacy there. Mm-hmm. So that's I'm on the same as both of you guys here. I do really want to see, though, JJ, Ronnie Bell, some of these guys, they've already made big plays versus bad, like, not great teams. I want to see them make plays versus a team like this because you're going to go up against a defense similar to this versus Ohio State. And this is that game to prepare you for that. And I just want to see them take that next step to where everyone in the country right now is questioning, Michigan hasn't played anyone. Are they a legit team? Like, what are they going to be when they get to Ohio State? Everyone thinks they're going to get blown out by Ohio State. This is a game today to where you can completely switch the narrative on that and be like, hey, we're a legit top 5 team in the country.
Right.
And I just want to see that out of them. I want to see JJ take that next step today. And Blake Corum just continue to keep growing there.
And I think the big thing, too, is Penn State's had this whole entire week to study Michigan. And I think that's the advantage they also have as well. But on top of that, I want to talk about JJ, because that was another thing that you said that I agree with. For JJ, this is one of those games, because after the interception he threw last week, 10 for 10, he's perfect, which, it says a lot about his character and his work ethic. I mean, the guy bounced right back from a mistake, which you like to see that with young quarterbacks. But for JJ, the one thing we all talked about before the season and where he was utilized last season, his legs. Hasn't really done that as of late. I know this playbook's been vanilla, is probably a good word for it, lately. And again, there's different theories. Are they saving plays for maybe even today or against Ohio State? And I want to go to you, Sam. For JJ, how important is it to kind of get JJ out of the pocket, allow him to make plays with his legs, because we know he can do it?
I mean, it's crucial, because if you don't, you're basically taking away a big aspect of his game. I don't think J.J. McCarthy is best, at least right now, as a stationary pocket passer. But when he rolls out, when they utilize play action, you see how deadly he can be. You see how open those wide receivers can get, and that J.J. finds them. And you also see another thing when it comes to the use of his legs. There have been a couple of plays I can remember off the top of my head where these read options, he hands it off, where if he would have pulled it out and ran, he had just open green grass. And
right.
I want to see J.J. McCarthy actually, pull it out and run, because imagine how much more deadly J.J. McCarthy could be if he shows how good of a runner he is, if he can make that 3rd and 10, 15-yard run on the outside, if he can scramble a little bit more. Right. And also, Michigan has a good running game. And the best way to set up play action is to, keep the running game going, and then, fake the handoff and fool the defense. And usually when that's happened, it's worked. I actually read a stat somewhere that J.J. McCarthy actually leads the nation in yards per attempt off of play action passes. So utilize that a little bit more, Michigan. Open it up a little bit, because J.J.'s already proven that. I think a lot of people have sort of downplayed his season, like he hasn't been special or anything, which is true. he's been pretty good. He leads the nation in completion percentages. He's done everything that's been asked of him. He takes what the defense gives him. He hasn't missed nearly as many throws as people say, but I want to see a little bit more special. I want to see a little bit more dynamic, the element of his legs, the play action, the rolling, moving the pocket, rolling out. I want to see that today because at some point this season, whether it be today against Penn State or at Ohio State, they're going to need it.
And I think that's the narrative for today to watch is what does the playbook look like offensively? I think Adams kind of echoed this as well, and now that he's not here, you got to at least support my man. The one thing he pointed out all week is open up the playbook, open up the offense. I want to see different things, motion, pre-snap. I mean, that's something Michigan we haven't really seen. Again, is it because they haven't played anybody? Is it because they're saving these plays for later? Who knows? But I want to get your guys' predictions for the game, and then we'll move on to Michigan State, which we'll get through that one in about 5 minutes. Booner, I'll go with you first. Predictions, Penn State, Michigan. I
think it's going to be a low-scoring game. On the gambling side, I'm going with the under 49.5. But my prediction today, 27-17, Michigan wins this game. I don't think it's going to be you're going to see a high-scoring shootout here. I think you're going to see a ton of field goals and a couple touchdowns. 27-17 is my prediction for this game.
I'm going to go Michigan 31, Penn State 14. One of the things coming
Okay, Sam.
One of the things coming into this game is you don't really know how good Michigan is because they haven't played, really any tough opponents. But this is the game where I think they really establish themselves as a true Big Ten title contender, a true threat to win the national championship. And on Penn State's side, they have a lot of talented players. James Franklin can recruit, those two freshman running backs, a freshman defensive end, a freshman linebacker, and of course guys like Joey Porter Jr. in the secondary. But I think going on the road to the Big House is a tough thing to ask for a team filled with freshman contributors. Penn State hasn't historically done very well in the Big House.
Right.
I think this is the game where Michigan finally has that complete game and gets that national sort of respect as Big Ten and national championship contenders.
And listen, this has nothing to do with James Franklin. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to coach circles around him, so I'm not too concerned from who's. It's really just, and you put it perfectly. A lot of freshmen, both running backs are freshmen. I'm going to lean Michigan as well. Obviously, I think they'll cover. I'm going to go 31-21. I think they get a 10-point victory. They cover that -7 spread. But another team that's favored by 7, coincidentally, Wisconsin. At Michigan State, by the way. So it's kind of reverse roles here. But we'll start with Michigan State before we get to Wisconsin. Michigan State this season, I think a lot of Michigan State fans would even tell you themselves they've expected a step back. And I think people now are starting to realize the impact that Kenneth Walker single-handedly had last year, because a lot of the issues they have this year, they had last year. Bad secondary, offensive line is bad. Again, Peyton Thorne played a lot better with K9, running for 2K yards, a guy who ran for 5 touchdowns against Michigan. Michigan State, this is one of those years you're just going to throw it in the trash. I mean, this is one of those years that it's pretty much, listen, if you think they could beat Wisconsin, which we'll talk about in a second, they had talent coming into this season. I mean, I talked with Owen, a guy who covers Michigan State for our network, and one thing he always talked to me about was, hey, Berger, Broussard, they got the run game. And look at Sam smiling at me. But the reality was, they actually, I mean, listen, they believe Jaden Reed's back. I mean, you have Keon Coleman, who actually looks pretty good this year. But the reality is they need a lot of help. And it's not just guys who can get the transfer portal. This is a 2-year process for Mel Tucker. You got to go out and recruit, which he's done that. I believe they have the next 2 recruiting classes. They have a higher recruiting class than Michigan, if I'm not mistaken.
I think next year.
So, again, that's something that Michigan State fans got to swallow, and a lot of Michigan State fans understand that. It's going to be a process, but they take on Wisconsin this week. Wisconsin, after firing their head coach, again, I feel like that's always a rallying thing in college sports. You fire your head coach, a coordinator that everybody loves steps up, and now they have this newfound motivation. And now Wisconsin, listen, I know they're favored by 7, and I do think Michigan State will play better. Obviously, last week there was no chance in hell they were beating Ohio State. Even with the pick 6, they spotted them 7 and still blew them out. So, again, I'm going to go with just you, Booner, quickly. -7, Wisconsin, going to Michigan State. I know Michigan State historically has been a pretty tough place to play, but not this year. They ain't giving them no respect.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think it's a situation where you're sitting in for Michigan State and their fans. It's kind of I hate to say must-win game, but if you lose this game, you probably aren't going to a bowl game, right?
Right.
And you're you have there's a situation here at Michigan State where you could potentially lose 8 games this season after winning 11 last year. No matter what, with Kenneth Walker, transfer portal, all of that, going from 11 wins to 8 losses the next year, to me, I'm a little worried. I'm sitting in Adam's seat. I don't know if I'm supposed to be in Michigan State side. I have my Michigan and Black here in his seat. We switched all of it. But just the matter of fact it is here is they have to win today or their season is completely done. They're not going to make a bowl game. They still have to play Michigan. They still have to play Penn State. They have to play Illinois on the road. So, like, what are they looking to do today? They need to win. And I really don't think, I don't know where you guys are at. I don't think they win today. I don't know if they cover, if Wisconsin covers. I think Michigan State loses, though. This Wisconsin team, like you said, they just fired their coach 2 weeks ago. They're trying to, realistically, this is a Wisconsin team that still wins games.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, the last 4 or 5 years, or even longer than that, they've been winning 8+ games every single year. They just had a couple bad games, and they were tired of that, and they wanted to move on from their coach. I think Michigan State loses this game. They kind of get out of I think they're going to double their losses by the end of the season. They're at 4 now. They're going to end up with 8, in my opinion. I think they lose this game more than a touchdown. I'll take Wisconsin. I'll take them.
It's funny because Wisconsin does 2 things very well that Michigan State can't do. It's run the ball, play defense. If you just look at, we'll just talk to the stats. I mean, it's crazy too. Michigan State. Here's a crazy stat. They average 26 points per game. Guess how many points they give up? 27.
Jeez.
So think about that. I mean, Wisconsin, they give up 19, but they have a much better defense, a much better run defense, much better passing defense. But Sam, I'll go to you. What are your thoughts on the game, my man, as a Michigan fan too?
So let me pose this question to the room. It's kind of rhetorical, but you guys can answer if you want. What does Michigan State do well?
That's a good question.
They're really.
If you would have told me week 1, Sam, I would have said get after the quarterback.
They motivate well. I don't know.
But since then, that's a great point.
I mean, that's the thing. This season for Michigan State has been nothing short of a disaster. And this is one of those games against Wisconsin that is one of their few, I would say, winnable games remaining on their schedule. So they have to go out and win this one if they want any semblance of a respectable season. That being said, I don't really see a pathway for Michigan State to beat Wisconsin. Michigan State literally does nothing well. Peyton Thorne, without having K9 in the backfield, has been basically a turnover machine and a complete disappointment. Their running game, which everybody told me after the first couple weeks is just going to be like a replacement for Kenneth Walker. They're just going to come in. It's not. It hasn't worked out that way. And also, one second. When it comes to their defense, it is every bit as bad as it was last year. Their secondary sucks. They can't get after the quarterback. Everything about their defense is just completely awful. The one area where I thought they were going to be strong, and they still have been okay, is their wide receivers. But when Peyton Thorne can't get them the ball, there's really not a whole lot the wide receivers can do. Right. This is just a complete train wreck of a team. And just one more thing, because I have to throw a little bit of shade at MSU. I'm not ready to talk all of the, ish yet because Michigan still has to beat them, but yeah, guys like Owen, Jacoby Windman, Amir Speed, Jalen Berger, Jared Broussard. What have they done lately? A whole lot of not-ish. And that's what I kept seeing. Oh, my God, he's just going to replenish the transfer portal. A guy like Kenneth Walker is going to come around every year. No, dummies. Kenneth Walker is literally generational, and he saved your team last year. Yep. And both things can be true. They overachieved last year. They were way ahead of schedule. This year is more of a rebuild. That point gives more validity if Michigan State finishes the season like 6-6, 7-5, 8-4. But they're staring down a real possibility of 3-9 or 4-8. And that literally could happen. And if they lose to Wisconsin, Michigan State, I could see them maybe not winning a game the rest of the year because Michigan State is cooked. They're awful. They do nothing well. And Wisconsin, despite their flaws, they always can run the football, which they have this year with Braylon Allen. Graham Mertz, while being not a very good quarterback, he just lit up Northwestern for 5 touchdown passes. And if you can light up anybody for 5 touchdown passes, you certainly can do it to that sorry-ass Michigan State secondary.
Talk to me, Sam.
Talk to me, Sam. I like that.
Let's go.
All right. Okay. Well, I agree with everything you just said, by the way, even though I'm neither a Michigan fan or Michigan State, but it's funny hearing the passion from Sam's voice.
With the Michigan State running backs, too, they started to ease off a little bit when they started playing decent teams, right?
Right.
It's I mean, the hype was there going into the season. They played easy schedule the first 2 games, as they would say for the Michigan team, but it's faded away since then. I'm with Sam. I think potentially they could lose every game the rest of the year. I mean, they're definitely going to lose 3 more games, in my opinion. So, yeah. I mean, 8 losses on the year from 11 wins is just insane to me.
Hey, burger revenge game or no? We're not leaning that direction.
No.
All right, it's over. No. I'm just joking with you guys. I want to get your guys' score predictions. Booner, I'll start with you. What do you got? What are you feeling?
I will go Wisconsin 35 or 38. We'll do that. Wisconsin 38, Michigan State 21.
What about you, Sam?
I got Wisconsin 35, Michigan State 17. This is the type of game where you hear the boo birds from the Michigan State crowd. It's over after today. Wisconsin wins big.
Yeah, I'm leaning. Yeah, you got my Michigan State number correct. I'm going to go 34-17. I think Wisconsin takes care of business. Now, listen, this hurts me to say this because my co-host is a diehard now, at least for this season, a Michigan State fan. But even he would tell you they're going to get smoked. So that's the reality of it. I want to go to the next game because I just got my guy Jesse in the chat pointed out, and this is something we were talking about pre-show. Bryce Young, according to Jesse, we have to find a source on this, is expected to play.
Let's go.
Against Tennessee. So that drastically moves that line, at least to me. I mean, we talked about this before the show. Like, there's a difference between Milroe or Young. I mean, there's a huge difference, especially in the money line. But I want to get to a game before that quickly because there are some good matchups. Oklahoma State, TCU. I just want to give score predictions. We don't have to go in and deep dive it. Who do you got winning this one? I think it's at Texas too. Yeah, it's at TCU.
I have TCU winning this one. I think it's gonna be a high scoring game. Mm-hmm. It's crazy because the Big 12 for so long was like a low scoring defensive league, and right now like some of these teams are putting up a ton of points.
Yeah, they are.
I have TCU winning it by a touchdown, about maybe 10 points. I would probably go like 42-35, somewhere in that range there would be my prediction for that game.
I was going to go 38-31. I'll say TCU wins that one. I'm with you. TCU has impressed me, by the way. 13th ranked overall in the country. I know Oklahoma State's ranked 8th, but overall TCU is just, in my opinion at least, they've beaten some good opponents. I mean, say what you want, they just beat Kansas last week, and Kansas was the talk of the town for what they've been able to do. Sam, quick prediction, Oklahoma State, TCU.
I got TCU winning this game, something like 42-31. Max Duggan, TCU's quarterback, has figured it out and is playing at a Heisman level, at least for the past couple of weeks. That continues today. Oklahoma State's magical undefeated run ends today.
Okay, we're going to go to the next game. This is the game that I wanted to get to now that, my guy Jesse, shout out to Jesse, by the way, hooked us up with the Bryce Young news before we could check it out via ESPN, he says. So it is official. Alabama taking on the Tennessee Volunteers. And if anything, I just want to say this, and I've been just kind of sprinkling this all week. Hendon Hooker, better than Malik Willis. All right, so if you guys want to start a hype train, start it for Hendon Hooker. This guy has 40 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, last 2 seasons so far to date. Like the guy, and a lot of those are deep balls, by the way. I think Tennessee is number 1 in the SEC in explosive plays and number 2 in the country in explosive plays. Guess who's number 1?
Bama.
Is it Michigan?
Ohio State.
Ohio State. Oh,
think about that. So you have Ohio State's offense. Number 2 is Tennessee. In terms of explosive plays, it's going to be a great game, at least to me. Tennessee fans are crazy, by the way. Last week, we all picked LSU to win. That's just the truth. We thought it'd be tough to play in Baton Rouge. Little did we know Baton Rouge would be surrounded with Tennessee fans. They completely took over that stadium.
Yeah.
Listen, this matchup's really difficult, to be honest with you. I'm still going to lean Alabama in this instance. Bryce Young's playing. I don't see them losing. I do think Tennessee puts up points because, if anything, Alabama has shown us 2 things. 1, they struggle on the road. They struggled against Texas. They struggled last year against Auburn. They lost last year to Texas A&M, if I'm not mistaken, all on the road. Another thing is they've struggled against quarterbacks who can throw downfield. Quinn Ewers, they struggled. Before he went out, they were struggling. Hendon Hooker's a guy who can beat you downfield. So for me, it's going to be a good one. Bryce Young is starting. I think the biggest thing for me this game is Alabama's pass defense. And Will Anderson, of course, the guy who's projected to go, I don't know, top 3, top 2. But I think it starts with that secondary as well. Can you stop these explosive plays from Tennessee? And I think that's going to be the determining factor of the matchup.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Bama wins this game, and I think they win it by 2 touchdowns. Even though it's on the road there in Tennessee, this is just a game every single year all of us and everyone in the country falls in love with the team to beat Alabama in a top-ranked matchup just like this, and they go on the road, and we're all like, oh, Tennessee's going to make the upset. They're going to win by a touchdown. Like, all of this, the hype.
Right.
And then that's when Nick Saban just pulls you in and beats you by 2 or 3 touchdowns.
How many times have we said this in the past? This is a bad matchup for Alabama.
Every week in the SEC,
have we said this in the past?
Every week in the SEC, it feels like.
And they win.
Yeah.
Consistently. So
that's where I'm at with it. I just don't see it. Bryce Young's playing. I was questionable if he was out, but with him playing, I just don't see this Bama team losing. And I think it's a 2-touchdown game. We'll be sitting at halftime here, and it'll be 3-touchdown lead for Alabama, and we're all just going to be like, oh, what just happened? Like, all of the money right now on the betting side and gambling side of things is on Tennessee. All the betting slips, everyone is on Tennessee today. And Bama, I mean, I got them earlier this week at 7.5. I was telling you guys before the show, I wouldn't be surprised if by the time the game comes, it's sitting at 10.5. If it completely moves over. And you could go right now probably and get them at 8. Like, it's going to move if Bryce Young is playing. But you look at Bama, they only give up 160-ish yards passing per game, and that's Tennessee's biggest thing, is that that's how they have to win the game. And they haven't gone up against a Bama defense like this. I don't see Tennessee they probably will score a ton. I just don't see them being able to score enough to be able to even stay in this game versus Bama. I think it's still a little bit of lopsided. The home game kind of helps them out a little bit, but Bama always, they know what they're doing. They've been in these games.
And Bama have struggled against mobile quarterbacks, and that's something that Hendon Hooker can do. I mean, think about it. Think about his arm. It's nice. Also can make plays with his legs. For me, it's hard because I have to separate my man crush on Hendon Hooker and my reality of who will actually win this game. I'm still going to go with Alabama here. I mean, Bryce Young's playing. Booner, I think you're spot on. I think they'll probably win this game, to be honest with you. I can see 2 touchdowns minimum. But, again, I can also see a closer game. It could go either way for me, Sam. What about you?
I mean, if Bryce Young is playing, I've got Alabama winning, because you can look at how Alabama struggled last week against Texas A&M. You can throw that all out the window because Bryce Young was out and Jalen Milroe, their backup, who is clearly not ready to play, who is 1/20th the quarterback that Bryce Young is right now, almost cost them the game. Bryce Young is the best quarterback in the country to me still, and Tennessee, for all their dominance offensively, at least with the passing game, their defense has been a little bit suspect. They gave up 33 points to an Anthony Richardson-led Florida team, which leads me to believe that even if Alabama does give up some points to Tennessee, which I think they will, I think they'll be able to just outscore them because of a guy like Bryce Young, because of their running back Jahmyr Gibbs, who is really starting to come into his own and become that next great Alabama running back. So I see Tennessee being able to put up some points. I think that Hendon Hooker's mobility is going to give Alabama some trouble, but a lot of Alabama teams in the past have not had a pass rusher as good as Will Anderson. I think Will Anderson is a guy that's going to make maybe 2 or 3 plays that really swing this game. I think Alabama is going to be able to score whenever they want, and that to me will be the difference in the game. It'll be high scoring. Alabama wins, and they cover.
And I love this comment, by the way, by I think G. Calendar.
I was going to say the same thing.
Joe Milton comes in late, leads them on a game-winning touchdown.
Wouldn't that be something else?
That would be a story.
I mean, as much as us Michigan fans, don't like Joe Milton for how he kind of busted out at Michigan and kind of his attitude.
Remember the hype behind Joe Milton?
I remember.
Not to get off topic, but it's just crazy to think about how things change.
I remember, but Joe Milton would probably start at maybe half like the Power 5 teams in the country.
True.
It's just at Tennessee, you're behind one of the single greatest transfer portal quarterback additions ever. And Hendon Hooker, like you said, imagine if he actually goes out and balls out and Tennessee wins.
Oh, my
They will build a
gosh.
statue for him outside of Neyland Stadium.
Speaking of Heisman cases, this is it.
This is a Heisman game at its best right now.
If they beat Alabama, this propels him to me at number one, for at least in the number one spot. Maybe C.J. Stroud and him are going back and forth.
Yeah.
But if you can't tell me who C.J. Stroud, and if you compare Hendon Hooker, if he beats Alabama, like, again, Alabama's defense, it's disgusting in a good way. I mean, you have Dallas Turner, Will Anderson. You still got guys returning from last year, so it's not as good as they were, but they're still solid. I'm going to go with game predictions before we get into the next one. Booner, quickly, who do you got score-wise and why?
Bama 42, Tennessee 28. I think Bama just pulls away with this game. I think it'll be a close game all the way up to the third, fourth quarter. And with Bryce Young, I think this is just an experienced team with him behind as quarterback. this defense is going to be too much for Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to they're going to start the game, the momentum will wear off, the whole crowd will wear off. Alabama will take their shots, and then they'll come back out, and they'll be ready to go in the second half. I like 42-28 around that score, 45-28.
What about you, Sam?
I've actually got 42-28 as well. Not to be a copycat, but like I said before, I think it'll be a little bit of a shootout to begin the game. Both teams will be able to score, but Will Anderson will be a difference maker on defense. He'll make a few plays, maybe sack Hendon Hooker a time or two, maybe force a fumble or force an interception. That I think will be the difference in the game.
I'm going to go 38-24. I'm with you guys. I'm going to go with Alabama here. I don't see how Alabama loses this game with Bryce Young. I mean, this would have to be a performance that none of us saw coming from Hendon Hooker. We all can say, this is a Heisman game, but for him to go out and beat Alabama, I'm not going to just make that prediction. He has to go out and do it. If he does it, hey, credit to him, but I'm going to roll with the Crimson Tide here. For one of our last games, we're going to do two more before we close out here. Clemson, Florida State. Florida State, if anything, I get they're 4-2. But they've played up to at least to a certain degree.
Yeah.
At some points, played up to their competition. I don't think they'll beat Clemson. I think Clemson beats them by pretty decisively here. I know they're favored only by 4.5.
Yep.
4.5.
I think that's crazy that there's 4.5.
Why? Where's this disrespect from Clemson coming from here? Is it more so credit to Florida? It is at Florida State, by the way. They're at home.
Yep.
But why the disrespect to Clemson?
I think there's a couple things with it. One, obviously, like you said, it's a road game for Clemson. But the two ranked teams so far, Wake Forest and NC State, that Clemson's played, they've been kind of close games. There was a double overtime game, and then it was 30-20 in the other game. So it's not like they were blowout games. So they've still showed that they might be able to get beat. But I think this Clemson teams, we all know that they're one of the best teams in college football. Mm-hmm. Florida State's coming off 2 losses versus 2 ranked teams. I don't see them just being able to be ready just to come out and beat the number 4 team in the country after they couldn't do that the last 2 weeks versus worse opponents. So I think it's a steal. I got Clemson yesterday at -3.5, which I think is a point difference. Obviously not a big deal, but when it comes down to it, I think they win this game by 2 touchdowns. I just don't think that Florida State will be able to stay in this game at all.
Yeah, no, I'm leaning that direction too. I'm gonna lean Clemson. I like Clemson, honestly. I think this is a team that legitimately can be in that conversation to be in the college football playoff. I know DJ's having a bounce back year this year. They can run the ball. They have a good defensive front. And never caught out Dabo Swinney with some talent around him. But
and real quick too, this is the thing too. This Florida State team, they weren't supposed to be that great this year. They lost 8 games or 7 games.
And then they beat LSU early in the year.
Yeah, and they beat LSU, and then they beat a couple decent teams like Louisville and stuff. But I think they're just kind of starting to come into their sense. They might not be a top ranked football team. I just don't. I can't see them competing with Clemson today.
Yeah, no question. Score prediction, Sam. What are you thinking?
The disrespect for Clemson absolutely has to end, and one of the people who's perpetrating it is our very own Adam Baydoun. I think people have a hard time fathoming, and I'll get to the score prediction in a second, that DJ Uiagalelei is actually good this year.
Yeah.
They saw him last year.
Doesn't Neil, your guy Neil, our guy Neil, he's not a big fan of DJ.
Well, that's the thing. They saw him last year, and rightfully so. They were like, this guy's trash. This guy's one of the worst quarterbacks in the nation. He completely cost the team. But this year, he has been the most improved player in college football. Clemson is always going to have a talented roster because they're in the ACC. It's Dabo Swinney. Clemson, over the past decade, has been the second best program in college football after Alabama, so they're always going to get talent. All they needed was a quarterback who could play at least decent, and DJ Uiagalelei has done that. Clemson is going to destroy Florida State. Remember, everyone picked them to lose to Boston College, or some people, Clemson beat them. People were picking them to lose to Wake Forest. Clemson beat them. They were picking them to lose to NC State. Clemson beat them. Clemson is the top dog of the ACC. They beat Florida State by, I'm going to say, 42-13, and this might be the game that gets Mike Norvell fired from Florida State.
Wow. The legend killer dropping bars. And one stat that stands out to me the most is Florida State likes to run the football. Guess how many yards Clemson gives up rushing?
Not many.
60.
Wow.
They're good against the run.
Yep.
And they're gonna try and make this Florida State team one-dimensional, and I don't think it's going to go well for them. I got Clemson in a pretty decisive victory. Nowhere near Sam Flannel. That's bold, Sam. And you might be correct. We all might look like idiots. I'm going to get Clemson. I think they'll win by somewhere between 14, 17 points because they've shown so far they play close. But I do think, I agree with Sam, I think they'll take care of business here. If I had to give a prediction, I'll say 35-21. Why not? I'll go with Clemson here.
I'm around that same spot, too. I like it. I like Clemson. I'm with Sam. I don't know about like a 30, 40-point blowout, but the Florida State team is just bad just all around. Like I don't think they're that good of a football team. I think they won a couple games that made people think that, but Clemson's just getting absolute disrespect. There's always teams like that every year in college football who are sitting just outside of the top like 4, who are like in that bubble range to where it's like every couple weeks people are like, oh, they're going to get beat. They're going to get beat.
Right.
And they just keep proving you wrong. And they're just a good football team, and no one wants to believe it. And DJ's done a good job. He's completely turned it around from last year. So I do like Clemson this year. I've been against them the last couple weeks. If you go look at my tweets and my picks.
You came to the light.
Yeah, you have to be realistic a little bit here. They're a good football team.
Well, just quickly before we move on, I don't get – this isn't the little engine that could. This is Clemson, one of the top programs in college football. I just don't – I can't fathom why they get so disrespected this year. It's freaking Clemson. This isn't like North Carolina State making a magical run. Clemson, a powerhouse. Dabo Swinney, 2-time national champions.
Talk to him.
Come on now.
Talk to him.
Clemson's making the college football playoff this year, whether you guys like it or not. DJ Uiagalele's a good quarterback, whether you guys want to believe it or not. People can improve. This team has improved.
I love it. We're going to go to the next game. Final game before we end the show here. USC Trojans take on Utah. And again, Utah 4-2. This is the problem I have with this matchup, I guess, or at least I can see USC's defense realistically having a problem with this matchup is Utah can run the football, man. Like, they really can.
Yeah.
And I think that's something USC's defense, if you have an offense that's scoring as much as they are, and they haven't really played good competition, this is probably their real first test, at least to me. I mean, Oregon State, now you got Utah, and at least they're a top 20 team. I get they have 2 losses, but they're really one of their losses to UCLA, who's playing great football this year.
Yeah.
So, and they only lost by 10, by the way. I'm gonna lean USC here again. I'm not gonna go against them. I know they're underdogs. Utah is favored by 3.5 at home. A lot of emotional implications on this as well. Like that's the thing that nobody talks about, things you can't measure. They're going to have, is it 2?
I believe
2 of their
teammates.
former teammates who passed away on their helmets playing the game. They're going to be motivated. And USC has not had a loss yet, but also Utah struggled against mobile quarterbacks. I think Caleb can cause them some issues today.
That's kind of where I'm at with it. This USC team is, to me, way more talented. I wouldn't say way, but they're definitely more talented than this Utah team. Cam Rising, I was a big fan of his going into the season. I thought he was going to have a good year. I thought they were going to beat Florida. I thought they were going to beat UCLA, and none of that happened. This big game here, I just kind of lean more towards the talent because you have two coaches and 2 programs that have been decent this season. Everyone is expecting a ton out of them. I just think Caleb Williams, I don't think Utah, we've seen the dual threat quarterbacks versus Utah this year, and they haven't been able to handle it with UCLA and Florida. I think Caleb Williams is even better than both of those quarterbacks that they faced already. And this is going to be the best quarterback they might go up against in the whole regular season. And I just don't see it. I think it's a steal and kind of disrespectful because we talked about it with Adam the first couple weeks of doing the show here, is USC's lines were at like 6.5, 7.5, 10 versus bad teams.
Right.
And they were easily covering for the longest. It was just disrespectful where they were at and people were putting them at. I think it's the same situation here. I think even on the road they should be favored here. And I think USC wins this game outright here. So I'm taking a money line today. I love them to win this game still.
Actually, I'm with you, Booner. If I'm a betting man, I don't know how you look at USC plus 135 and not bet that.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane to have USC as one. But I get it. The circumstances around it. I have 2 different opinions on this. In terms of if I want to make money, I want to go USC. But if I'm thinking realistically, I kind of want to go with Utah here. Like, I don't think USC, it's too early, because, again, they're a team that we think with Lincoln Riley will make noise in the college football playoff. But is it too early to say they're that team this year, Sam?
I don't think so, because I think they will have the opportunity to get there, and part of making noise in the college football playoff is getting there. I also have USC winning this game just because they are so much more talented than Utah. And Utah, they just faced Dorian Thompson-Robinson of UCLA. Dorian Thompson-Robinson exposed something in Utah's defense. And even Anthony Richardson early on in the year, his mobility just absolutely killed Utah. This is not the Utah team that I think is built to pull these kind of upsets. The type of Utah team that I think is more dangerous is the one that's kind of ground and pound, great running game, great defense. And this was a Utah team that was more built with Cameron Rising to put up some points. But if you're Utah, you cannot outscore USC. Caleb Williams is an even better quarterback than Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Caleb Williams has arguably, besides Ohio State, the best group of weapons in the entire country with Jordan Addison and Mario Williams. And, oh, by the way, USC has a running game with Travis Dye, the former stud from Oregon.
Took him from Oregon, yeah.
So,
California kid.
Yes, absolutely. If Utah can make a couple of big stops, I could see them hanging around.
Yeah.
But this just isn't the Utah dominant defense, good running game, kind of vintage Kyle Whittingham team. And at this point, their national championship college football playoff hopes are over. So I think this is kind of the game where USC sort of stamps their foot in the ground as true national championship contenders, and they go out and take care of business. I see USC winning probably by between 7 to 14, and finally them getting the respect across the nation as a true contender.
And too, we mentioned it before the show. We talked about it a little bit, the college football implications here. But the Pac-12, if USC loses this game, really all they have left is UCLA to get into the college football playoffs. I think USC, this is I keep saying must win. I hate saying must win, but for the Pac-12, I'm sure a lot of people in the Pac-12 want USC to win this game so they can have an opportunity to get someone to represent them in the college football playoffs. And Sam brought up a good point, too, kind of on the running back side of things. Travis Dye is way better, I think, than people think. I don't know how many times people are able to watch USC play this year because they're late games, but he's been huge for them, and I think it does come down. I saw in the chat I think it was Jesse talking about the USC defense. In a normal year, maybe them not having a good defense would be a huge point, but Utah's defense is basically similar to them, and that just turns into a shootout game here, and I just don't see Utah being able to outscore USC with the weapons they have. If it's an offensive game here, I just can't see this Utah team being able to do that with all the running game, the air game, all of that. I just can't see that happening today. I think it's like another 2-touchdown game we're looking at here.
I think as much, and I get what you're saying. I would tend to trust Utah's, at least if we're talking one side of the ball. I would say defensively, I would probably lean Utah. But offensively, I'm leaning, obviously, clearly it's USC. So that's the tough part for me. I agree. If Utah wins this game, it's going to be low scoring. I don't think it'll be a shootout.
They have to get a couple, Sam said, big stops.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I did this one time earlier in the season. It worked out for me with Penn State. I'm going to go Utah here. I'm going to go Utah wins 24-20. I think it's a low-scoring game. I think Utah is going to be able to run the football, control the time of possession, keep Caleb off the field. If they can do that, this USC, at least their front seven, are going to get tested today, and that's going to be the big test. Now, if you can stop the run, if you're USC and you force them to punt, their offense gets on the field, I can see this game flipping very quickly. But I'm going to go with Utah here at home. I know it's a tough place to play. They have a lot to play for. If they could run the football, give me Utah winning this game 24-20.
I like USC today, and I'm gonna take back. I 2 touchdowns. That's crazy because it's such a good matchup. But I think you are kind of on the right side with, and Jesse keeps saying it in here, with the guys on their helmet. At home, it's hard to play at Utah. Just all of those implications, but I can't go away from playing USC. When I get them at plus money, I just can't go away from it. I think they're too good of a football team. Like Sam said, this is a game that gets
betting-wise, you're absolutely correct. I'm not betting on Utah.
And I think they win this game. I think USC gives you 38 points, and Utah sitting at 27.
Right.
I think it's something in there, or maybe 37-30, somewhere in that range where it's about a football or a touchdown score there. I just can't see Utah winning this game for some more talented team.
What about you, Sam? Give me your score predictions, and we'll close it out here.
I got USC 31, Utah 21. I don't think Utah will be able to stop USC consistently. And I just want to address one quick thing in the chat. I know Jesse Adams and Cody Richardson, they basically have said, like, Sam's not watching the same Utah team everyone else is. Well, the Utah team that gave up 29 to Florida and 42 to UCLA. I know Utah has the home field advantage this time, but mobile quarterbacks do give them trouble. This isn't the Utah team of yesteryear. It's a little bit more finesse. Although they still have some, grit up front, this is a more finesse Utah team, and they're not built to out-finesse USC, and USC wins this game just because they're more talented.
This is too, like, on the Utah side, it's similar with a lot of these games today, is some of these teams are just starting to get into tougher schedules in conference. The two big games that Utah's played, Florida, UCLA, they've lost both of them. You could say Oregon State, but they played them at home, which Oregon State, going to Oregon State is tough, but outside of that, I mean, UCLA and Florida, the two toughest games you've played, you've lost, and you have another tough game. I just don't see them being able to pull this game off at home.
Hey, well, there you have it. You got our guys. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's show. Adam, we'll be back next week. Just not feeling good this morning. So the boys had to hold it down. Shout out to Booner, Sam, Michael Gentry in the booth, taking care of business on the ones and twos. But until next Saturday, guys, drop a like. I know if you're watching on woodwardsports.com, go check out the merch store. Tons of new designs. Trust me, they're fire. I'm about to place an order today and get a couple for myself. But until next time, thank you guys for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And we'll see you guys next Saturday. Deuces.
You have an opinion? Make sure it's